Hi, everyone, and welcome to Discovery Presents Chats with Changemakers. I'm your host, Tiffany, and I'm a ninth grader in Texas. I participated in Discovery's Future City competition when I was in middle school. Every Friday, we will welcome a different guest from the engineering community. Today, our special guest is Emily, a design engineer at Collins Aerospace. Emily, welcome.
Hi, everyone.
So, Emily, I hear that you have one of the coolest jobs in the entire country. Can you tell me about it?
I love my job. I get to work on really cool projects that go to space. So one of my favorite things that I work on is the EMU spacesuit, which is those big white suits that you see all the astronauts wear when they're floating out of the space station. I work on the big backpack that's on the spacesuit, so the part that gives them all their oxygen and cools them down.
Wow, that's so awesome, designing spacesuits for astronauts. How does one get a job like that?
So I just graduated from college about 2 years ago now. And while I was in college, I got to work at a startup that worked on spacesuits as well, and that's where I learned the very basics. And then after I graduated, I studied using lots of books, resources on the internet, and I just kept applying. And then after a year, I got really lucky and I landed this job. And ever since I've started, I've been learning every day.
Wow, that is so cool. When exactly did you decide that engineering was the career pathway that you wanted to take?
I realized I wanted to be an engineer when I was in high school. About my last year of high school, I took an engineering course and it was really creative. I got to 3D print objects and make things with my hands and see them in person and also take them apart. And I found it really interesting and I really liked it. And the main thing for me was that it was creative because I really liked my art classes as well, but also with science. So this was a good mix of being creative and making things as well.
Right. So, sounds like you worked on some pretty cool projects. If you had to pick one, what do you think would be your favorite project of all time?
While I was in college, we have a big project that we have to do at the end. And my team and we made a remote control plane where the wings would change angle. So
Really?
we could change the angle with the remote and then see if it could fly.
Did you just design that from scratch?
No, we were able to take a remote control plane that we had, and then we had to design the wings from scratch. So the wings were done from scratch, and we had to get the motors and everything and build the wings using laser cutters and all these cool machines that we have at our school.
Wow, that's so awesome. Now, let's talk a little bit about spacesuits. What do you think are the most important details about a spacesuit?
Oh, okay, that one's kind of hard because everything in a spacesuit is absolutely critical. It's super important because every piece in there helps the astronaut with their tasks or to make them comfortable, to keep them cool, or to give them oxygen. I would say that the part that I work on is very important, the backpack, to make sure that they can breathe.
What does the backpack have in it?
The backpack has a sublimator which cools down and like heat exchangers and everything you kind of like in a building where you have air conditioning, making sure that the air is flowing, making sure that it's removing the air that the astronaut breathes out, and also has cool water to run around the astronaut to keep them cooled down.
That must be like pretty big. Is it a pretty large backpack and heavy?
It's pretty big, it's pretty large, and they have jam-packed every single thing in there. So there's not a lot of space in there. So it is very heavy. But because they're out in space, they don't feel any of the weight because they're floating around.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just curious, this is kind of a silly question, but what would happen if you went out into space without a spacesuit on? Like, that can't be good for you.
Very bad. Um, the astronaut would not be around for very long after that. Um, the really cool thing about a spacesuit is that it's its own miniature spacecraft. It's the smallest spacecraft you're ever going to get, and that's what a spacesuit is, which I love about that. And
Right.
the
So
spacesuit,
sorry, go ahead.
the spacesuit, they when they do spacewalks, they're in there for about 8 hours as well.
So the specific thing that you work on is the EMU, right?
Yes.
So did like Collins Aerospace like invent that or?
Yes. Many years ago, Collins Aerospace used to be called Hamilton Sundstrand, and they designed the backpack, and they worked with another company who created the fabric portion, and they've been partners ever since. And this is still the same spacesuit that they've been using for many years. They just continue to make it better and to maintain it and make sure that it's still working to the best standard.
Right. What kind of material is it made out of?
There's a lot of different materials in the equipment, lots of metals, from titanium to aluminum and stainless steel. It's just a mix of lots of different components inside of it. So also in the backpack, they have oxygen tanks, and they also have a separate emergency life support system as well. So they've never had to use it yet, but it will give the astronaut an extra 30 minutes of air as well if they need it.
Wow, these spacesuits seem pretty complicated. How long does it take to put one on?
To put one on, I haven't done it myself, so I actually don't know how long it takes to put it on. But if you watch the spacewalks, right in the beginning, you can actually see them put the spacesuits on, and they can't actually always do it themselves. They usually have other astronauts help them squeeze them in and make sure that everything is locked. And when they get out of the spacesuit, they also need help from the other astronauts to get out of them.
Okay, yeah. That must take like a couple hours then.
I don't think it's
So,
hours, but it is a long time, yes.
yeah. So here's an interesting audience question. Let me clean it up a little bit. Let's say that the astronaut had a 32-ounce Slurpee right before they went out into space. How would they take care of business?
So in the spacesuit, they do have, they do wear adult diapers, which they can use, but a lot of them most likely go to the bathroom before they get in the spacesuit, as they're in there for 8 hours.
Yeah, very true. So how do you actually test the spacesuits to make sure they're safe before they actually go out into space?
So for what we work on, they test every single small piece as well before they put it together. So one of the tests that they do is they shake it. They get the one and they'll put it to a table and they'll shake it like crazy to make sure that it can stay together and it will work, so that when it launches, the shaking in the launch won't affect it. So that's one of the tests that they do.
Wow. Okay, so we have another audience question. So being a female in engineering, have you ever come across any negative experiences, and how did you overcome it?
I feel like I'm very fortunate in my professional career. Since I've started my job, everyone has been super encouraging, and I've always had a good experience at work. In university, there wasn't a lot of girls in my classes, but I also didn't have any issues with that. So I think I've been very lucky with my experiences, as I am still young. So I think that everything has been good for me so far.
Right. So now I'd like to talk a little bit more about you. So when you were a kid, who was your role model and why?
For my role models, I definitely looked up to my mom, who's super strong and determined. But when it comes to professional, I look up to a lot of the people that I work with now. So a lot of the people that I work with are super smart and super talented, and I know that I can go to them with any questions, so I look up to those people.
Right. What kind of engineers do you work with?
So in my department, I work with a lot of mechanical design engineers, which is what I am. They are just a lot more experienced. So I sit with all of the mechanical engineers, but I also meet with project engineers who help make sure the overall project is going okay, because we're just a small piece of the puzzle. But most of the time I'm with other people that are also mechanical engineers.
Those sound like some really cool people. It seems like the work you're doing could have a really big impact on the future. In what ways do you think that your job encourages you to be a change maker?
A change maker?
Yes.
It's a very big question. I definitely think, I know I've mentioned it before, but being creative is a big part of being an engineer. And I'm always challenged to think differently and not always go with my first decision, but to think it out and also look at other people's perspectives to make sure that, you know, everything is running smoothly. Again, like being creative and thinking outside of the box. A lot of the people that I work with come up with crazy ideas that are really, really smart, and I like seeing how they do that as well. So I definitely think being creative and thinking differently makes you a change maker.
Yeah, those are really awesome qualities to have. So we have another audience question. Where did Emily go to school and how did she figure out she wanted to be an engineer?
So I said that in my last year of high school that I took an engineering course and I really liked it. That's when I decided that I wanted to be an engineer. I went to New York University, NYU, which is why I still live in New York. And they've been getting a lot better. They have a new makerspace. It was very hard, but it was worth it. I did a lot of projects while I was in university.
Very cool. Can you tell us about some of the projects that you did?
So I think my favorite class was an aerospace class, which focused on airplanes and their engines. So we had, a project about going through all of the different stages of the engines. It was 2 years ago though, and I haven't worked on it since, but at the time that was my favorite project and it was my favorite class and the one I did best in.
Very cool. So it's important to try new things even if they're hard. Can you tell us about a time that you failed at something but you learned from that experience?
Definitely in university, the classes were hard, so I did fail one of my classes and I did get close to failing a lot of other classes. But what I learned from that is how to ask questions. So when I went to my professors to ask questions, it was important that I looked and made sure I was actually asking the correct questions, and they were very detailed on what I specifically wanted to know, so that they were able to give me a better answer instead of a very general answer.
So how do you apply that to your work now?
And yeah, I definitely do that now. So I have a lot of questions at my job. It's very complicated. And as I said, everyone around me is super smart. So by the time I do go and ask them a question, I need to make sure that I've really thought it out and I've looked at everything around what I'm doing to make sure that it's a specific question and that I can get the best answer from it instead of something very general, and then it would just lead to more questions.
Yes. So we have another audience question. How much do spacesuits cost?
I don't know the specific numbers, but I have estimates from a lot of the books that I've read that an EMU spacesuit is around $12 million.
$12 billion?
$12 million. But I'm sure, a lot of the research and development behind it is a lot more as well.
Wow. So we have yet another audience question. What are important attributes needed to be an engineer?
To be an engineer, creative again. I think being creative is super important. Hardworking. It's okay if you struggle with math or science. You don't have to be good at those. You just, as long as you try, and you work hard, you can definitely get to where you need to be. And also, what's very important is communication. Make sure you can communicate your ideas clearly and ask questions a lot, and make sure that you're able to interact with your team well.
Right. So now we're going to transition to some more fun and random questions. What do you like to eat for breakfast?
I like to eat, this morning I had egg whites and bacon and an English muffin.
Wow, that's really nice. Has that changed at all since the quarantine?
Yeah, before quarantine, I ate cereal, but now I have more time, I can cook myself some breakfast.
What's your favorite type of cereal?
My favorite type of cereal is from England, which is where I'm originally from, and it's called Weetabix. And I ate it every day for 22 years.
Wow, you must really like it then.
I have lots and lots of boxes.
So if you had a time machine, what time period would you choose to visit and why?
I think my favorite time period is now. I don't think I would actually go back in time, because I think now there's so much innovation and so much change. I love to see everything, all the creative work that people are doing. And I think now is the best time to start an idea. There's a lot of help with the internet and with books that you're able to access, that you can get anything you want done.
Right. So if you could have any superpower, what would you choose and why?
If I could have a superpower, I would love to have photographic memory. I would love to study anything and speak any language if I had photographic memory. I met someone at school that had it, and he was very smart, and it was insanely cool, and I wish I could do that.
That's very unique, but that's very cool. So have you been able to work from home during the quarantine, or has the way you do your job changed in any way?
So I've been working from home for almost 2 months. It's pretty difficult when you work with a team, so you're used to turning around to ask questions a lot, and it's very interactive. One of the things that's changed the most is that I can't go into the lab and see the parts in person, which is very good when it comes to visualizing what you're looking at, and going and touching something is so much better than being on your computer. That's what's changed the most.
Yes. So what is a skill that you haven't quite mastered yet, but you would like to?
There's so much to learn. Right now, some of the calculations that I'm working on are really difficult, but I'm getting a lot of help from the people I work with. Skill-wise, I think I would just like to continue to work on the programs that I'm working on and mastering these calculations and the basic understanding of what I'm doing, because the first thing is to learn the basics before you can get into anything more complicated.
Right. So what is your favorite thing about your career as an engineer?
My favorite thing is the people I work with that I've met have been very incredible. I'm on a team, and there's an astronaut on one of the teams that I work on, and getting to interact with a former astronaut is incredibly cool. He's very smart, and a lot of the people I work with as well, they're funny and they're smart, and I just think that's the best part of being an engineer, is learning from your peers and learning from the people you work with.
Right, that's very inspirational. So we have another audience question. Where do you hope to be in 5 or 10 years?
In 5 or 10 years, I would still like to work on spacesuits by then. I think that would be amazing. I wouldn't change much actually, because I'm really happy with the job that I have and where I am. I would like to go back to school and to get another degree and learn more about the project side of engineering, not just the hardware part of engineering.
Can you tell us a little bit more about like the hard web part? Is that what you were saying?
So what I work on specifically is designing one piece. So one piece, and I'm coming up with a design on how to put it in to fit with the other pieces and how it functions. Whereas the project side is overall, how do all these pieces fit together? So I would like to see the big picture as well, because right now I'm working on a very small piece, but very detailed. I have lots of information on the detailed piece, whereas on project, you're getting all the overall information, but it's not as detailed on each specific piece.
Okay, yes. So it seems like you've had a lot of impressive achievements. Can you tell me maybe the one accomplishment in your life that you're the most proud of?
I'm very proud of, I went to a competition while I was in university, and it was a hackathon, which I love to do. And it's where they give you a problem and you form teams and you try and come up with solutions, and not necessarily code or engineer anything, but to come up with a strategy on an idea that you and your team have come up with. And I ended up making, 3 really good friends from that, and we ended up winning the competition, and we won.
Oh, wow.
And
congratulations.
I'm proud of that. Yes, thank you.
This is our last question. What is something we wouldn't know just by looking at you? Do you have any hidden talents or interests?
From looking at me. I don't think a lot of people think I'm an engineer when they look at me. I would say that's kind of my hidden talent, but not so hidden at the same time. I do get a lot of, wow, you're an engineer? I didn't know that. I also think people don't know that I'm very artistic when they look at me as well. But again, being creative and being an engineer, my 2 favorite things.
Right. Well, Emily, thank you so much for joining us today. Chats with Changemakers is taking a break next week because I have my AP Computer Science test, but we'll be back on May 22nd with David Curry from TE Connectivity. Until then, I hope everyone has a great week.